This week on the Game Adventure, next gen Microsoft might be the saviors of physical media after all, but in this generation, we've got some of the best retro handhelds you've ever seen at prices that every parent will love. There's plenty of good left in gaming to talk about, so let's go.
The Game Adventure Podcast is a family-friendly show that keeps you current in the world of video games. We'll talk about current developer and tech announcements, go through the best ways to play our favorite retro games, and cover an always up-to-date wish list of games to keep an eye out for. We're doing it every week and always in under an hour, so let's go.
What is up, everybody? Hope you're doing fantastic. Hope you're doing better than I am. You can kind of maybe hear in my voice that I picked up a cold this week. Hopefully I'm on the downhill side of that. Things are starting to get better. We've got a busy show today, though. Lots of industry updates, some really cool screen tech to talk about in the tech update section, and then tons of retro news. We've got new handhelds coming out, some unreleased games coming to the Virtual Boy via Nintendo, and of course, a very long list of some of the best games to keep an eye out for both yourself and for your kids. Kind of had a wild week this week. I had a segment from this show go a little bit viral. I'm going to say a little bit viral because it was viral for me. It was like 25,000 people looked at this clip talking about people making their own physical media. And that was kind of fun and also kind of not fun at the same time. It was legitimately exciting to talk with new people and also at the same time kind of highlighted how much toxicity there is in the world of video games. So I feel like I have kind of mixed feelings about that. But the world keeps moving. I make this show to serve you and to have a little bit of fun on a Saturday morning. So let's go ahead and jump into our first segment. A couple things happened in the industry, the video game industry this week. The first of which was a kind of leak from Microsoft that indicates they might actually be planning to keep physical discs for longer than Sony. So Sony was in the news over the last couple of weeks for saying we're going to discontinue physical discs in our next iteration of the PlayStation. But Xbox, if this is to be believed, that they are not moving away from physical media quite as quickly, at least. So they are probably going to keep a disk drive in the next system. Now, that might make sense if the next Xbox is more of like a PC hybrid. But again, something that's come up in the comment section, something that's come on podcasts is that with game sizes getting to where they are, so like, for example, the next Grand Theft Auto game is going to be absolutely enormous. I think it's not an example of a game that I want to promote at all on this show, but it's a good example of like the next generation of tech going into a game and kind of the size of the file that's creating. It's going to be too big to even fit on a Blu-ray. So the question remains, like, what does physical media even look like in the future? We don't really know. Another big piece of news this week was EA's buyout. So Saudi Arabia finished their $55 billion buyout of EA. And EA took on about $20 billion in debt to finance this buyout, which is leading like the analysts to predict, hey, there's going to be a lot of financial changes at EA. And the things that they're worried about on the player side are things like monetization of games where we haven't seen monetization in the past. So games like Madden, that are huge franchises that historically have had some monetization in it. Are we going to see a bunch of microtransactions start coming to EA games in order to make them more profitable? I don't know. We don't know. It seems like for sure they're cost-cutting initiatives. They're trying to cut like $170 million in organizational efficiencies. That's standard for any company that's bought something out, is to kind of shake it up and say, what do we really need out of this to get the value out of it? But what does that mean for developers that are working at EA? Probably things are about to get pretty tight for them. And for players, it might be kind of a rough road ahead. It kind of remains to be seen what changes will be made at EA. I guess we'll find out when they happen. Roblox was in the news again this week because they are trying to shift their strategy to focus their content more on older audiences. And in doing so, they've lost about 72% of their market value. So whether that remains permanent, market value can always change in the course of time due to a lot of factors. So I don't know that that's really the story. I think the story here is that they're shifting away from kids, which I would say is actually a good thing because I don't think that Roblox has ever been a safe place for kids in the first place. And a lot of experts who have researched not only the game, but also interactions that happen in that game space are where I get that opinion. I've formed that opinion based off of what I've seen in the data. Some of the issues that have come out with Roblox, if you're not familiar with this, if your kids are playing Roblox, parents, you should be aware of this. Stranger contact is a huge risk. This is not just a video game, it is more like a social platform where people play games. And that means that these are like mixed age communities. You do not know who is contacting your child. Now, they always claim that they have these like user controls, especially for parents, to parental control, help keep your kids safe. But the reality is that those controls have failed to live up to the standards that we would expect from those types of controls. You've got voice chat in there that raises dangers of things like bullying, all kinds of content that you do not want your kid to wander into, because a lot of the content on here is user generated. And the bottom line is that user generated content is really hard to control. Nintendo found this out with like some of the Splatoon games where, oh yeah, you can draw pretty pictures and you can show them off to your friends. Well, guess what? People draw some not so pretty pictures on there. And I actually had to take one of those games away from my kids because of the stuff that I was seeing on there. I said, oh, wow. Okay, well, this isn't kid friendly. And Nintendo had to step in to like figure out, okay, how do we change this experience? Roblox has not stepped in. Some of the other issues with Roblox is Robux, which is their digital money. So the whole game system is created around having these user-generated content experiences that they can then sell and have like a economy within the game. And if kids don't understand the real value of money, they certainly don't understand the real value of Robux. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard personally from people that I know. The kids have spent tons and tons of money without even realizing what they're doing. So I would just be very, very cautious around Roblox. And personally, I think it's not a place that you'd want your kids to be any more than I would leave my young kids at the mall on their own today. And by the mall, I mean the outdoor shopping center, because they've killed all of our indoor malls in the Midwest, which is not smart. But anyway, I'm getting on a rant. I'm getting off topic. Be careful around Roblox. That's all I'm going to say about that. Halo Campaign Evolved really pulled in some large numbers on Xbox. However, not as large as you would think. So it was only ever the fourth most popular game on Xbox. And on PS5, it actually did even worse. So I talked last week about how this game probably looks best on like PS5 Pro, which is kind of funny. But as far as like PS5 users, only about 1% of them ended up playing this game. And my guess would be it was really big on Xbox because it came to Game Pass. So I don't know how much of an impact this game is really going to have on the Halo franchise or on, I guess, people playing this game in the long term. But initially, it looks like it hasn't been quite the splash that we would have expected it to be. And then not as a result of that necessarily, but layoffs happened at Halo Studios, which I think it's always good to see these things in context, because a lot of the news pieces, every time this happens, every time, it's a big news story. Oh, tons and tons of layoffs came to the studio. I can't believe that they finished a huge game and now they're laying off their staff. Well, the reality of this industry has always been that it's project based. And so you hire a bunch of people in, they work on a project, and then when the project is finished, you might get to move on to the next project with that company, or you might not. It's not inevitable. So there are some studios that have done a really good job of securing long-term funding. They have really strong pipelines, which allow them to kind of overlap multiple projects. And sometimes the studios that are doing like live service games have been able to keep people on for longer than they would have otherwise. But I think what feels really shocking and why this keeps making the news is that the scale of this, we're talking about like thousands of people after a project is done on a large scale. And so we see like the revenue numbers come in that it was really successful. and then we see the people that have been laid off. And the connection the news often makes is between those two, and say greedy company lays off independent developers, and big company bad, little people good. But it's actually more complex than that, and this goes back a long ways in this industry. So I would take all those news reports with a grain of salt, and hopefully the folks that are leaving Halo Studios are moving on to the next project and continuing to make games. That's the hope, right? Nintendo, on the other hand, saw a huge profit increase of 150% that had absolutely nothing to do with video games. It had everything to do with tariff refunds. So they got a $300 million tariff refund from the United States. We're not going to talk about tariffs because this podcast is not that kind of show. But essentially, the United States charged them a whole bunch of money to import their games into the United States. And then they were told you can't do that by the court system. And so they had to refund all of that money. I don't think that Nintendo has really passed along the tariff losses in the first place. So I don't know that they definitely don't owe it to anybody to give that back to the players or anything. And frankly, when we buy games, we know what we're buying them. We know the amount that we're paying for them, and we decide if that's a good value or not. And I'm happy that Nintendo has $300 million more to hopefully invest in making great games. And Nintendo historically is one of my favorite companies because of the way that they invest in family-friendly games so often. They seem really player forward, and so I hope they continue to be that way. Let's jump over to some really cool technology in the tech update. We'll get to that display tech in a moment. A couple other stories first. The AI RAM crisis continues. So a recent announcement came out that the entire memory stock for 2027, so that means all of the memory that the primary companies are making and plan to make for the next year has already been sold before it's even been manufactured, which is largely due to the memory needs of AI data centers. So Microsoft and other companies have responded in various ways, but I think one of the interesting connections there is Microsoft started pushing 8 gigabyte RAM on laptops again. So in years past, manufacturers of PCs and computers are always talking about getting more RAM. They're trying to push you into the next size up of RAM, and now they're actually doing the opposite. And the irony is that companies like Microsoft and other of the tech giants are pouring money into these enormous AI data centers, which are helping to drive up the demand for memory in the first place. So I guess I'm a little skeptical when a company like Microsoft starts to push consumers into getting less RAM. So they're telling us you're going to have less RAM and you're going to be happy with it because we bought up all the other memory for our AI data centers. Sorry about that. Anyway, let's move to a news story. Look over here, right? That seems kind of like what Microsoft seems to be doing here. And maybe that's just me being a little negative about the future of AI impacting the world, and specifically memory for regular everyday people when we want to buy a new computer. So not such a positive story. The next one is, though. So Xbox announced some updates. They're doing all kinds of fun stuff to celebrate the 25th anniversary. They're rolling out some new dynamic backgrounds and changes to gamer picks. I'll talk about that more as I get to kind of play around with them. They're adding more control over game captures, which have always been I moved on from trying to capture things on my Xbox to using a capture card instead, which is what I use for almost all of my game capture now. And I even use it for this show. So I think most people who are capturing a lot of stuff are pretty happy with the setup that they have. But it would be nice if they really want people to share things that they're doing in games to make that a lot easier with the native software on the Xbox. So that's cool. Wishlist got added. You can add up to 1,000 games to a wishlist now. I feel like that's maybe unnecessary. At 1,000 games, do you even know what's on your wish list anymore? I don't know, but apparently it is an easy change for them to make. Another change that they're talking about doing is having some sort of platinum trophy equivalent for Xbox. So PlayStation has these platinum trophies that you get when you 100% all of the achievements for a game, and Xbox wants to add something like that to their players as well. So like if you've 100%ed a game, it shows up at the top of your list, but there's no special trophy or way to show that off. Mine that I've actually done that with are very few. So this doesn't impact me a ton, but it is cool. So I guess I'll have, let's see, Plants vs. Zombies is one that I've 100%ed. So I'll have some sort of platinum achievement equivalent for Plants vs. Zombies in the future. I'll show it to you when I get it. Another big announcement from Xbox was that they're talking about, they've already talked about moving original Xbox games to Windows 11. So being able to play those Xbox games on a PC natively, which is very cool. But they're also talking about emulating Xbox 360 games on PC natively, which would be very cool. And this is probably going to happen alongside this Project Helix new console. So I'm guessing we probably won't hear a ton about this detail-wise until we start hearing more about their new console. I guess some folks are kind of cynical. They think this is a trap to get more people into Game Pass. I think the positive way to look at that would be if they want Game Pass to work, they've got to find a way to make it into a good deal for people. And if you're suddenly able to play a ton of Xbox 360 games as part of your subscription, I think you've successfully added value there. So that's awesome. Finally, let's talk about some of this new display tech that is being brought to gamers, especially kind of the company TCL that makes TVs, is trying to target PC gamer enthusiasts who actually want to get over to the couch. So a lot of the displays that you have that are like gaming displays, like a monitor, are going to focus on high refresh rates and really high resolution displays. And so they're trying to make some changes to their TVs that are going to appeal to like PC gamers, which is interesting. And one of the ways that they're doing that is they're having displays that are able to switch natively between multiple resolutions and refresh rates. So like you could have 288 hertz refresh rate at 1080p, but then you would have a little higher resolution option that would have a lower refresh rate. You're kind of always balancing those things. This really appeals to me because I use a large computer monitor to do all of my work on, but also this is what I play video games on. So I've got like the Switch 2 that actually does 4K. And so I would want 4K resolution for that. But then I've got the Xbox Series S that can do 120 frames, but it only does 1440 resolution. So like, oh, okay, so that's a different combination. It's always this game of like trying to balance your how fast do I want the refresh rate to be and how high do I want the resolution to be. Those are kind of the two main things. And so these TVs are able to do this swapping out based on what you're using instead of having to pick one and go with it for all of your inputs. So I think that's pretty cool. That's like a unique way of saying what's the existing technology that we have and what's a way that we can serve the people who are using this more dynamically, which is awesome. Another cool thing that they're building into this is a Dolby Atmos Flex Connect, which is this cool thing that allows you to place wireless satellite speakers anywhere in your room without wiring them to a receiver. And the TV is able to automatically calibrate spatial audio based on those speakers. So I used to work for Best Buy back in the day, and we had like this whole home theater setup. I would go out to people's houses on occasion and set up their home theaters for them with surround sound and running wires, and like the Geek Squad agents who would do that, which was super cool. But in this day and age, we don't actually have to run wires necessarily in order to have really, really good sound. And so tons of cool wireless options that, 20 years ago, we would have not even thought was going to be possible. So that's awesome. Another kind of cool piece of tech coming out is this Tarantula Pro from GameSir. It's a very cool looking PC and Xbox controller. I think this is maybe one to keep an eye on if you're looking for a good third-party controller that you can use on Xbox and PC at the same time. With that, that's pretty much all of our new technology. Let's jump over to some older stuff that's still worth celebrating on the Retro Rerun. Two of the handhelds that we talked about last week, the Anbernic RGSP and the AYANEO Pocket Advance, are now out and getting into people's hands. The reviews have come back for both of them, and they're very positive. These are nice, tight little gaming devices that allow you to play Game Boy Advance titles in particular, and they're both probably capable of playing, probably up to PS1. I think the Pocket Advance is a little more capable if you want to kind of push things up to PS2 era emulation, but they're both definitely built around handhelds. So the Anbernic RGSP is the clamshell design. It runs on Linux. It does not have sticks, which is okay if you're playing Game Boy Advance titles, which is what it's built for. And the price on that is only between 60 and 70 bucks after getting it shipped. So that's really a fantastic price point, especially if you have multiple kids like I do, and I might want to get more than one of these so that we can actually play together, harkening back to the Game Boy Advance era. And then the AYANEO Pocket Advance is a little more expensive. It's around $90, but a ton of performance coming out of that. This one is not Linux. It's Android 12, and it has active cooling and analog sticks on it as well. So it's a little more capable if you're looking for something that's kind of doing a little more emulation and a little less just Game Boy Advance games. But fantastic options for parents and just adults who want to play Game Boy Advance games also, especially the clamshell design. Awesome to just slip in your pocket. Some new games came to the Switch Online, kind of under the radar a little bit. These are some Virtual Boy games that are actually games that were canceled. So two of the titles that are unreleased Virtual Boy, they were never released, are called Zero Racers and Dragon Hopper. Have now come to the Switch Online. So this is really awesome of Nintendo to release these unreleased games, to just let people play them. And it is great for game preservation because these games that would have just kind of been hidden under the rug somewhere are now actually able to be played. So I think that that's fantastic. Props to Nintendo for not making this a way to sell them or get money from them, instead just adding them to this subscription service that they have, which I guess they're getting money from, so it's not totally out of their virtuosity, but I appreciate what they're doing anyway. A fun story I saw this week was details about Mario from the original NES game. So Mario has this ability to run across spaces, like one block spaces if you run. And it's even used in some of the worlds. This was originally a programming glitch. So it was something that they accidentally had happen. But when Miyamoto saw this happen, he said, let's make that a feature, not a glitch. And it's like featured in some of the worlds. It's a game mechanic that you have to use. Get running to run over these like little block spaces. So I think that really highlights like some of the fun little things that happen when people who are geniuses in game design take a look at something and they say, you know what, instead of treating this like a glitch, let's treat it like a feature and see what happens. One more retro story that came out this week was about the original Xbox. So the original Xbox had this short little intro that had this like green blob that was floating in light, and then it backed out of this tunnel and backed out of the X that forms the Xbox. And what the story said was, actually, we found out that this video was not just a video file that was saved for the beginning of the Xbox. It was actually a mathematically generated real-time 3D tunnel that was like a generated space with physics-based lighting. So it's really incredible that they were using that kind of tech back in the day with the original Xbox. But what's really cool practically is that every time you watch that happen, it was slightly different every time. So who knew that every time you watched the original Xbox intro video, it was completely unique and a little bit different from every other time that you watched it. I think that's really cool, just looking back to see how that worked and how the engineers decided to do it that way instead of just doing a video file. So very cool. With that, let's jump over to a kind of soapbox topic for a couple of minutes. Today, I want to talk about the future a little bit, and I'd really like to hear from you on this as well. If you've looked at the news cycle lately, It feels like all we ever talk about when it comes to the next generation of gaming, next generation consoles and games, tends to be really negative. And we hear about how expensive the consoles are going to be, and we worry that they're going to take our disk drives away, and we stress out over like AI buying up all the RAM and making things unaffordable. And it's honestly a pretty pessimistic view of the industry, and I've fallen for that as well. But if I look back, my whole life, when it came to looking forward to the next generation, it was about kind of dreaming what would be possible. It was about being excited for what might be possible. And I remember talking to my friend when the GameCube was still codenamed the Dolphin, which was an awesome name. We were geeking out and we were saying, like, it's going to be this huge leap in graphics like we've never seen. And I remember when we finally, so my friend got it for Christmas before I ever got a chance to play it, and we booted up Luigi's Mansion. And I just remember looking at Luigi's hand as he opened the door for the first time. And it wasn't like the blocky 64-bit polygons that we were used to. It was smooth, and we were looking at it and like, oh my gosh, this is the most unbelievable graphics I've ever seen. But it wasn't just about the graphics. It was about the games. Like, I remember fast forward to when the Wii was announced. It was this like intense anticipation of what is the next game gonna be like in my favorite franchise on the Wii, right? Like in the next Zelda game, am I gonna swing the sword with the Wiimote? Is it gonna feel like you're actually in the game? There was always this sense of excitement because these companies were kind of taking risks and testing the boundaries of what was fun and what was possible. And somewhere along the line, I feel like we've lost some of that excitement and that news cycle that just kind of sucks the fun out of the next generation when all we focus on is how much it's going to cost and what features we're going to lose. So I just have to ask, like, where did the excitement go? I know these consumer issues matter. They matter to me too. But I think what I'd like to ask of you, the listener, um, is to tell me, what are you excited about for the next generation? Is this something that we can connect around and talk about? Like, what are you hopeful for? What kind of technological changes do you want to see in the next PlayStation or the next Xbox or even the next Switch that's going to, probably be a ways down the road, but maybe not so far as we think? What do you want to see happen in your favorite game series? Like, what do you want the jump to the next generation to look like? And what do you hope is possible when that jump happens? I just want to see us get back to some of the hope and the excitement when it comes to the next generation of what's going to be possible, because that is part of the fun in video games. We've got a pretty sizable game list this week. There's some stuff happening in August and September. One of the big announcements this week was Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, the next Fire Emblem game coming to the Switch 2. It's actually releasing on September 17th, so that's only like a month away. Some of the big kind of things that were talked about as part of this Nintendo Direct was that it's set in this empire that's across the sea. And so it kind of is going to expand the lore or the story of the three houses. And so we're kind of returning to some of the familiar settings that fans have been asking for since 2019 when that game came out. They're going to have an interesting kind of story mechanic where we're switching between parallel people. So characters that are doing heroes, I guess, that are competing for these heroic games. And you get to switch between their storylines in one save file, and you get to kind of see how their stories like parallel each other and intersect each other, which is really unique. I don't know how they're pulling that off, but I'm excited to see how they do. There's also more like exploration where you have this like city hub with the open world movements and also this like dungeon crawling. And so you kind of get back to these elements that haven't been seen for a while, where you get to kind of hang out and do what you want, but also go dungeon crawling when you want to. A few more options that haven't been around in a game like this for a while. And then also the tactical combat mechanics. So there's this like blend of a ton of mechanics, including weapon durability, class certification exams, and then you've still got these new additions like these blaze arts that are supposed to drain your HP. new mounts, like flying and ground mounts, and then also weather effects that are going to be dynamic on the battlefield that can impact how the battle goes. So I think they've really kind of started to test some things out with this game. I've never been into the Fire Emblem games. Honestly, I just haven't given them a chance. I haven't had time. So if you've played them, let me know which one I should start with if I want to start checking out the Fire Emblem games. I know that there's a lot of lore, a lot of story, and historically, those are the games that have really appealed to me. So maybe this would be a good one to jump in on. Lots of fun indie titles coming out this week, a couple of which we've talked about before. Big Walk, we've talked about before. That is out on PC, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch 2. I actually can't remember if it's out on Xbox or not. And then we talked about Pokopia a little while ago. That one has an expansion pass that is now out called the Bubbly Basin. So if you've been playing Pokemon Pokopia, it's time to go, I guess, underwater. So this is a ton of underwater stuff. It is a paid expansion, but it looks like it's going to add a lot of gameplay. Fields of Mistria is one that I have never talked about before. This came out of early access and into the full 1.0 launch on August 5th on PC, but this one is really similar to Stardew Valley. You can kind of see it in the trailer, how similar it is to Stardew Valley, but it's supposed to be a little more chill. So I think kind of the joke around Stardew Valley is you go in thinking that it's going to be this chill farming sim and you're doing all this cool stuff. And then you, like, by the time you played for a couple hours, you've got your checklists printed out and you're stressing over what crops you have to grow this season. And I only have a couple of days before this festival to get this food ready. And it gets like oddly stressful. I experienced this. I ended up pulling my wife into it, be like, here's your checklist. Keep track of what I'm doing and tell me what I need to do next, which was kind of awesome and created some great memories. But it definitely was not the chill farming sim that I thought it was going to be. Fields of Mistria promises to be much more chill and much more relaxed. So maybe that's one worth checking out if that's your jam. Another game called Wild Blue Skies is one that comes out on August 13th, and this will be on PC and all major consoles. You can play it anywhere. And this looks a lot like, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it looks like a Star Fox ripoff, but the visual style is really fun. I think they try to kind of do some different types of goals instead of just kind of shoot your way through and get to the end. But the style looks really fun. It looks like it's an indie game, so it's a little less expensive. So if you're kind of hankering for a good like rail shooter game, and you don't want to spend $50 on the new Star Fox game, try Wild Blue Skies. That comes out on August 13th. Another big game that came out this week was Splatoon Raiders, and we've talked about that before, but the reviews on that are starting to come in. Definitely that's more of a AAA game, not an indie title at all, but I think this is a great example of a game that you can play with your kids. It's definitely not built for multiplayer. It's a single player experience. However, in classic Nintendo style, they have been able to take a existing type of game, in like the loot shooter and somehow made it more fun and more relaxing. And all of the reviews for this are just really, really positive in all of the best ways. And so I'm excited to actually get my hands on Splatoon Raiders. My friend texted me this week and said, I'm going to have to get Splatoon Raiders for Christmas. And I'm thinking like, I don't know if I can wait for Christmas to play Splatoon Raiders. So maybe I'll have to get a physical copy and then we can share, because that's awesome that Nintendo makes that very easy to do with their physical copies and actually with their digital copies too. On the Switch 2, you can share games. You can lend them out to a friend even though you have the digital copy. So like props to Nintendo for doing things that nobody else is doing in that space. Those are really the two main. There's one more game that's coming out for families to be interested in, and that is Minecraft is releasing again. This is actually the Minecraft for the Switch 2. So Minecraft on the Switch 2 is coming, I think, October of this year. But it's going to have the vibrant visuals update. You can carry your saves over. There's even an upgrade path, which there's more information coming on that. But upgrade path, if you have it on the Switch 1, you'll be able to probably pay a little bit of money and upgrade it to the Switch 2 version. Up until now, you can play Minecraft on the Switch 2, but you're playing the Switch 1 version. This is actually the next update for Minecraft, and it's available in October to actually play using the Switch 2's advanced graphics capabilities. So that's exciting for Minecraft fans. For subscriptions this week, a couple things happening. I'll try not to double up. Some of this we've already talked about. So usually the subscription services are announcing what's leaving the service sometime around the middle of the month. So those will be kind of the same for a month or so. Xbox has some free play days going on this weekend. So NBA 2K26, the standard edition, you can actually play through August 14th for free. You do not need Game Pass for that. And then 2 Tom Clancy games, the Ghost Recon Wildlands and Ghost Recon Breakpoint. If you're into like those strategy shooters, those you can play through the 10th. So just this weekend. Game Pass, we've got a couple that are coming soon. Power Wash Simulator 2. I've heard this game is a lot of fun. I would rather go get my hose and probably wash my car than play Power Wash Simulator 2. But if you want to be in a simulation where you're power washing off things like, oh gosh, they have like Star Wars ships that need to be washed off. It is fun. That's being added on August 6th. So that's available as of today. And then coming on August 11th is the game preview for Grounded 2. So if you are at all interested, if you played the first one, that one might be one to check out via Game Pass on August 11th. Leaving Game Pass, there's a couple that are leaving. Aliens Fireteam Elite is leaving. Atlas Fallen, The Reign of Sand, and then also the indie title Firewatch is currently available on Game Pass, and that is leaving midway through the month this month. Over on PlayStation, we have the PlayStation Plus Essential Monthly Games. That's on like the lower tier of the PlayStation Plus. And Big Walk is actually out day one on PS5. So that one we've talked about before. Yeah, check that one out. If you're a PlayStation Plus member, there's no reason why not to pick that up and play it. A couple of games leaving PlayStation Plus. Around the middle of this month, Earth Defense Force 6. I actually played the second one of these back in the day on, must have been on Xbox One. That was a really fun game. So if you like strategy, gosh, what is this? Kind of like balloons, like where you have to, tower defense. There we go. Tower defense type games. You might enjoy Earth Defense. Harold Halibut, we talked about last week, was the one that's created using motion capture. So you can check that one out. That's leaving mid-August. The game Roki, and then also Bomber Crew. Those are all taken off in mid-August. And that's pretty much the end of the game list. So let's jump over to kind of some mailbag moments before we take off for today. A couple of the comments that I got on like the social pieces that I posted was one of the pieces I posted was talking about the 1 billion players that Microsoft wants for Xbox. And I said, that's like an eighth of the world's population. I don't know that they're going to achieve that number of players. And somebody said, well, they do have Minecraft and Candy Crush. I wasn't even thinking about Microsoft owning a number of pretty popular like mobile titles that people play on their phone. So I don't know if that counts. I guess that makes the 1 billion seem a little less interesting if you're counting like people who play Candy Crush for 5 minutes a day. If you're counting those in your daily users for Xbox, I suppose maybe 1 billion players is doable still. Still seems kind of high to me. Another piece I posted about VR, somebody said there's a couple of technology is really advancing in that space. I said it hasn't really taken off yet, but I think it might if they can manage to bring some experiences that appeal to more people. And a couple of folks said, yeah, actually there's some games coming out like indie titles. More indie folks are starting to get involved in VR development, games for VR. So maybe that's what actually starts to turn the tide in the VR space. Another one I posted was about the Halo playing better on the PS5. And somebody said what really would be a fair comparison would be the Xbox version versus the standard PS5 version, not the PS5 Pro, which is a fair point. I still think that it's just funny that this game is playing the best on the competitor's hardware. But are we entering an age when like PlayStation and Xbox are no longer think of themselves or as each other of like the direct competition? I don't know. I think maybe we see that happening a little bit in the next generation, but I don't know that we're quite there yet. And then finally, the post that got more interest than I ever anticipated it doing was talking about people making their own physical media. Like I said earlier, this went kind of semi-viral, lots of opinions. I posted that story because I was excited for what this guy was doing and how he was kind of taking it into his own hands and having fun with like making covers and printing it on the disc and like really going old school, like very retro in his approach to making things, but like using modern day technology. I thought it was really cool. And frankly, I was kind of disappointed by how much doom and gloom there was in response to what was supposed to be just a fun story. One guy, though, did say, I'm going to go out and buy some rewritable DVDs right now. So, like, some people at least saw that for what it was and said, this is awesome. So, obviously, that was something that resonated with people. I'll try to post more fun stories like that in the future, I guess. So that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed this show, please take a second to rate this wherever you're listening to it. I think it does help with discovery of this show. And then also consider joining my free email list over at thegameadventure.com. There's a link in the show notes. I don't send you spam. I just give you early access to the YouTube version of this. If you want to watch the video version, I usually post that on like Sunday afternoons on YouTube, but I also post it a day early via a link to folks who are subscribers to the show. Also, it's just a good way for me to keep in touch with you. That's a little more reliable than catching you on social media. So I hope you have a fantastic week. I will see you again next week, same time, same place.